Welcome to part 2 of my step-by-step restoration of this Gluck Trading Company Chateau branded manual wind wristwatch from the late 1960s or early 70s. It's not running and it's really not setting. Will it even wind? Let's see. No, it's maxed out. The Gluck Corporation is still in business in Queens, New York and is best known for their Armatron brand. The Chateau brand were all mechanical watches made by Gluck in a variety of eclectic styles in the late 60s and 70s. Many of these watches were based around affordable one-jewel Swiss-made movements. In video 1, we completely disassembled and cleaned the watch, which is where you've come in. Let's see if we can get it running so I can wear it. The balance wheel pivot rests in a jewel that's covered by this shock-mounted metal cap. I'm not familiar with how it's held in place, and I tried unscrewing it with no luck. Since I don't want to damage anything, I think I'll clean the jewel by soaking the whole balance assembly in one dip, and then trying to oil the jewel from the balance side. There's a tool called an automatic oiler which is purpose-built for lubricating cap jewels through the pivot hole, but I'm just going to have to try my best with what I have. What's the worst that can happen? With the balance mounted in the otherwise naked main plate, now's a great time to see if the impulse jewel, or in the case of this watch, the balance impulse pin, is properly aligned with the pallet fork, which affects the beat error and overall accuracy of the watch. What we're looking at here is the pivot hole for the escape wheel and the pivot hole for the pallet fork. What we want is for the alignment between these two holes to draw a straight line to where the impulse jewel or impulse pin is located at the bottom of the balance in its resting position. I'll use a little puff of air to make the balance oscillate. You want the pin to align with those two holes. Another puff of air and we'll let the balance wheel come to rest. If it doesn't align, then we can adjust it by turning the hairspring on the balance staff. But since the alignment looks good, no adjustment is necessary. So now I will remove the balance complete and give it a bath in one dip, which should remove any residual dirt and oil. After a few laps around the one dip bottle, I'll lift him out and dry him off with a few puffs from my blower. With the balance cock held down by a piece of Rodico, I will carefully lift the balance wheel and meticulously drop a tiny drop of oil directly into the jewel hole. I thought that might be too much, and I was right. 2 days later, all that oil ran down the balance staff, got all over the hairspring, and completely stopped the watch. Lesson learned, and an automatic oiler has been ordered. So let's see if we can pop this little kiff spring. Now I can be a little bit more aggressive. Yep, there we go. What kind of mess have we created? So is that all that is? Yeah, that just looks like a flat pivot. Is there really anything to clean off of him other than the Rodico? I threw him in the one dip. Here's the drill. We'll reinstall the spring and we'll flip over this cap. Try to put a bead of oil in the center, and then we will replace him in the movement. So then we'll have a lubricated jewel or a lubricated pivot point on both ends of the balance. Well, surface tension is having a grip. Let's see if we can use that to our advantage. There we go. That wasn't my cleanest installation. This is a brass or formerly gold-colored crown. I'd like to replace it with a silver crown. I put the winding stem in a pin vise, and I can't get the crown off. It's stuck. So I'm going to try heating the crown just a little bit in the flame of an alcohol lamp. If there's some Loctite holding the crown onto the stem, then possibly the heat will break that bond. Let's see. Did that do the trick? Well, yes, it did. I have these replacement crowns, but I can't use them because the threaded portion of the stem is 1.17 millimeters, and the hole on these replacement crowns is about 0.87 millimeters. You can clearly see how this diameter is too big for the generic replacement crowns. So what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to put this crown back into the watch, assuming that it's running, and assuming that one day we may replate the watch. We'll then replate the crown as well to match the finish of whatever the watch ends up being. Let's clean the mainspring. Just going to use a cotton cloth with isopropyl alcohol on it. Carefully pulling it through, and you can see there's definitely some stuff coming off. We'll pull through as much of the spring as practical without deforming it. We'll be careful of that little hook at the end. I'm going to apply a light film of Mobius 8000. This is just a general watchmaking oil. Apply a little bit to a piece of watchmaker's tissue. Fold it once, fold it twice. Third time's a charm. Put a little bit of oil on there. Just a light little dollop right there in the middle. We'll just pull the spring through that oiled bit of paper there. We're going to call that good, and we'll get out the winder and wind the spring back into the barrel. I consulted the video that I originally shot, so I'm looking at the picture now. Place the spring in the right orientation. Let's use that information now to pick out the correct mainspring winder. We have a choice of left and right, or clockwise and counterclockwise, and then we have a size. So what we want to do is we want to find the winder that fits into the barrel. And so in this case, this is my number 5. And so now the question is, which way does the handle go? In this set, red is right-handed and blue is left-handed. When you pick out a matching handle, the handle gets inserted into the spring upside down, like this. So with a right-handed handle, if we were to turn this clockwise, the little hook grabs the hole in the spring. So in order to grab the spring in this orientation, we need a right-handed winder. We can now put on the winder barrel, and we're going to turn that until the little slot crosses. Let's put on the handle. So if that arbor has hooked on the spring, it will draw the spring into the winder. And when we get close to the end, we want to make sure that that little hook goes into the winder barrel. It did that crazy thing again. Sometimes it kind of freaks out and you don't get the hook in there. That's okay. We can still put this spring into the barrel, even though that little hook got stuck on the outside. Let me wind this down until it relieves tension. Now I want to sneak the arbor out, leaving the spring in the barrel. So there's the mainspring in the winder. Remember that cutout that was in the barrel? The hook of the spring will sit in this little cutout. I'm just going to put a couple of dots of medium weight oil inside the barrel. It looks like there's a lot under the microscope. As the spring winds, that will get distributed. Line up the spring the best we can, and then we're going to press down on the plunger. The spring will expand itself into the barrel. Here we go. It's in. Are we close with that little tail? Oh, it shifted. Darn, so much for perfect plans. But here's what's going to happen. When the spring winds, the spring will probably slide until the tail gets caught by the little opening, so no worries. Let's get the arbor in. Okay, the pin vise did the trick. I'm not happy with how it marred up the arbor a little bit, but right now we have the hook engaged right there on the hole of the spring. Let's give it a drink. Put a little bit right there on the shoulder and wick a little bit of oil right in here where the arbor meets the barrel. And there's our barrel complete, except for the fact that it doesn't have a lid, all ready to go back into the watch. We are ready to assemble the watch. We're going to start with the keyless works. We'll start with the sliding clutch and the winding pinion. We're going to put a very little bit of our heaviest lubricant, our blue grease 9501, just do a touch on the pinions on that side, These teeth will be engaging the other side of the sliding clutch. There's lots of points of engagement for the stem. I'm going to start with the sliding clutch, drop him into his little home. Here comes the winding pinion, and he gets dropped in with the sawtooth gears facing the sliding clutch. I'm going to thread the stem through those two parts. Now, do you remember this little intermediate gear? It actually rides on a post that's part of that hold-down plate. So what I'm going to do is actually apply a little bit of grease to that surface where there will be contact, and we're going to let surface tension hold that in place. Okay, the next part is the setting lever. Put a little bit of grease right here. Let's drop it down into the hole. See how we did. That post down here rides in another one of those slots in the winding stem. This comes into contact with the yoke, which is the next part to put in place. Here's the yoke. It sits on this post in the upper right, and this tongue sits in the groove on the sliding clutch. And now that we can see where it's going to go, I'm actually going to back off a little bit and put a little bit of grease where it's going to make contact. Just a little bit. Put a little bit on the front and back edge, drop him back over his post. I'll hold him down in place while I load up the spring. This end goes in that slot in the sliding clutch, and then this needs to touch the setting lever. I'll do one little dot of oil right there. Remove a little bit of my excess here with my Rodico. We'll place this piece on. This hole has a post under it that goes over the intermediate wheel. This sets on top of the setting lever here. This hole goes on top of the post that's holding the yoke spring combination. Let's see if we can get this lined up. Get the hold down screw in place. A little visual inspection. Finally, snug on that screw. Now for the final test, let's see if everything engages smoothly. So here's winding position. You could see the sliding clutch is engaged with that winding pinion. Pull it out to setting position. I'm just going to drop a little bit of grease in the places that I see there's contact, and we'll let it wick in just a bit. And then I will dab off all the places where the grease isn't needed. Setting position, winding position, and we'll just remove any surface grease that's not necessary. Leave it cleaner than we found it. Keyless works complete. I'm still struggling to understand this cannon pinion. This looks like two pieces, doesn't it? But they're jammed together. I think them not turning is going to be a problem. I think I'm going to drizzle just a little bit of lightweight oil in between here, and then I'm going to try to put it on the staking set and see if I can't loosen this top cannon pinion from the wheel underneath it. Just take a little bit of oil, just wick it in there. Soak it in with some capillary action. We'll let nature work on that for a little while. It's time to assemble the train of wheels. Barrel complete. That one's easy. Let's put the escape wheel in next. Now let me see if I can just eyeball it here. There we go. Here's a comment on this movement. Since there's no jewels, it's really difficult to see those holes. They're so small. On a movement that has jewels, even though the holes for the pivots are very small in the jewels themselves at least act like a target. So you have something that's easier to see. So you can aim for the jewels. Next is the third wheel. And the pinion goes up. And it's another situation where there's a very, very small pivot. Now I'm not using the microscope for this because I want the maneuverability of being able to use the loop and kind of move around and get an angle. I'm afraid that if I tip the movement to get the right angle to see down on the microscope, I dump out the wheels. Here's the second wheel, and this is that naughty wheel that was basically stuck in place. We've got it nice and clean, much bigger pivot, and he drops in place. His lower pinion engages with the teeth on the barrel, and then his outer teeth engage with the pinion on the third wheel. Last but not least is the fourth wheel, and this is the wheel with that long seconds hand pinion that the second hand mounts to, and he has a hole in the main plate we have to thread them into. And once we have them aligned, we let gravity do some of the work for us. It's like a dance. Everything should engage with each other. And this escape wheel, we really need him to be standing straight up. So here's our wheels. We want to make sure the leaves of this pinion here are engaged. Now this is the tricky part. We need to drop this bridge across all of those pivots. Everything's got to line up just so. I'm using the screw holes as a guide, not pressing down. No pressure down, just total sideways pressure. You can see that pivot's in place. So fourth wheel is in place. I feel like we're close, very close. Okay, optimistically we might be in a good place here. Just get this screw started. Just light enough to keep the bridge in place. The escape wheel is turning. Nice. Let's go ahead and tighten this down just a little bit more. Excellent. That was a battle. Let's lubricate this. I'm going to use my lightest oil. Wow, it's so weird dropping it into a well that doesn't have a jewel. It just kind of goes everywhere. Let's put some oil on this extended pinion for the second hand. See if we could be a little more targeted on this one. I think that went better. And I'm going to switch to medium weight oil and apply some to the pivot on the second wheel. Back on the wheel side, I've switched to a finer oiler, lightweight oil on the smaller gears. And I'll switch over to my medium weight oil to do the second wheel pivot. And I'll use my oiler to very gently move the train of wheels and exercise that oil into place. Just do a little cosmetic touch up here. The barrel bridge, I don't expect him to give us as much trouble as the train wheel bridge. You just line it up over the arbor. Got a post right there. Right in here, feels like it's making a little bit of contact. So I think I'm going to put a little bit of grease on that inside edge. Let's get the barrel bridge back in place. Let's see if everything is still turning freely. And I'm just going to apply a little bit more medium weight oil where the arbor comes through the barrel bridge. So we'll just clean them up. Just like that. I'm going to assemble the click, the ratchet wheel, and the crown wheel in just a moment. But before I do, I want to clean the click spring, which I did not run through the cleaner. And I'm going to put that little spring in my one dip. And while I'm doing that, I think I'm going to throw a couple of these other parts into the one dip. I'm going to throw the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel in there. It just looked like there may have been a little bit of residue after coming out of the cleaner, and that should take care of it. And I think I'll also put the pallet fork in there and just give him a little swirl. Bath time. There's our click spring, our crown wheel, there's our ratchet wheel, and our pallet fork. We're going to stopper it because that evaporates so quickly. We'll just give everything a gentle swirl for a minute or two. Actually, more like for just a matter of seconds. I'm going to remove them one at a time and clean them against this little piece of Post-it paper. So there's the click spring. You can see how quickly the solvent evaporated off. Put them back with the click. Grab our pallet fork, and I'm going to use my blower to speed the process. There's a look at his other side. Nice and shiny clean. It's worth mentioning that you do not want to blow too firmly on these little parts because you will send them rocketing across the room. Did you see that? You really sometimes don't appreciate how small and vulnerable these parts are until you send them airborne. Drop him on the paper. And I'm going to take a little piece of watchmaker's tissue paper and just give him a little rub, sliding him around through both surfaces of the paper to remove whatever oils might be left over. So between the solvent and giving it this little massage, we'll get these nice and clean. One more to go. And let's get that paper on there right away. It's like drying your good crystal glasses as they come out of the wash, so there's no water spots. It's looking pretty good. I'll hold him down and give him a little blow. And you know what? If you still see something on him, by all means, now's your time. See that little speck? I'm going to do my best to keep this part from flying away. I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to see if I can take this tiny ball of Rodico, just stick him right there. Keep him in place with a tiny ball of Rodico. Oh my goodness! Maybe this wasn't a great idea. Thought it was a good idea. All right, so I think the Rodico is taking over my spring. All right, get out of there. Let me clean him up. Okay, is he clean? Yeah, he's clean. Okay, using this stick as a hold down, we want to load him up here. I'm going to take some of my medium weight oil. Let's do the click wheel. I'm going to put a little bit of my heaviest lubricant on the surface where he slides. We'll line him up with the square shape of the arbor. Line him up, drop him in, fasten him down. I'm going to hold him in place while I snug him down. Before I put the crown wheel in place, I'm going to do the same thing and apply a little bit of grease. And I'm just going to put a little bit of oil on this side of the wheel where it's going to rub on its retaining screw. And now we will put the screw in place, remembering that this is our reverse threaded screw. And we just want to eyeball, make sure that the teeth on the crown wheel are aligning with the winding pinion. And let's get this screwed down, which means lefty-tighty. And I'm just going to use my, my helper stick to hold it in place. Clean it up a little bit with some Rodico. So if everything is working as it should right now, as we wind the crown, the spring should load up and drive the train of wheels forward. Next order of business, we'll stop the train of wheels from spinning freely like this, and that means it's time to put in the pallet fork. Pallet fork has a very, oh, hello, there's some power in there, huh? There's a very small pivot on there. There's a look at the pins that engage with the escape wheel. You see that pivot hole right there? We need to ease him forward under the escape wheel until we get his little pivot in the hole. Now there's a couple of dimples on either side of the screw hole. There's a corresponding dimple to receive the bridge dimples. Sneak the bridge under that train wheel bridge, and you can just see that tiny, tiny pivot coming through. Just want to make sure we're still in the pivot before screwing it down, and we can't see the lower pivot right now. So let's just go back and forth, and it feels lined up. Just want to make sure this is moving freely, and it appears to be. That means that we can put a wind in the mainspring and see if what we've done so far is doing what it's supposed to do. And it does. And so with every snap back and forth, that represents the ticks and the tocks of the watch. We need to oil the pallet fork pivots. Okay, let's turn the movement over in the holder. Small amount, a little cleanup. Good. Lubricating a pin pallet is similar to lubricating a pallet fork with end stones. A small amount of Mobius 9415 is placed on the exit pin, and then the escape wheel is manually advanced by about 5 teeth. Mobius 9415 is actually a gloppy grease that liquefies on impact, but stays in place and doesn't splatter. The lubricant is reapplied until all of the teeth have been touched, and then the escape wheel is advanced several revolutions to distribute the oil. I got a little sloppy and cleaned up my mess with a small piece of Rodico. Let's give the movement a little bit more of a wind, and then we can put in the balance. See if we got this watch running. It all comes down to this. It feels like it's on the wrong side of the pallet fork. So let's back him up. See if we can get him in his pivot. Oh, this is a good sign. I gotta tell you, I'm feeling pretty good right about now. All right, let's get the screw in. Go, baby, go! This is awesome. So excited. I'm gonna give him a full wind, and we're gonna let him run, and then when I come back, I'll put him on the Timegrapher. It's gotta feel good for a watch that hasn't been running for so many years to all of a sudden be able to run, because that's what watches love doing. And while he settles in, I'm gonna zoom in on this little RL and a star, a 7-pointed star that says RL. If you know what that means, please let me know in the comments below. The watch has been running for 24 hours, and I put it on the Timegrapher, and I got it to within about 2 minutes a day. But right now what I want to do is try demagnetizing the movement to see if that has any effect on the performance. This is an old school bulk tape demagnetizer for audio and video cassettes. And it's basically an electromagnet with a push button, and it sends out quite a pulse. Because it is so strong, I'm going to need to make sure that I keep it a certain distance away from the movement when I start it up. Otherwise, it'll just grab whatever is in its force field and just slap it up against the magnet. So here's the drill. I'm going to keep the movement in its holder. I'll turn on the demagnetizer from about 2 inches away, and then I'm going to draw it slowly away and then release the electromagnet about 2 feet away from this. And I'll do that twice, once from each direction. And I'm just going to do a slow spiral and draw the demagnetizer away from the watch. That's one. I'll do the same thing from above. There we go. Let's give it a full wind. So this is the horizontal position. The rate is a little bit over 2 minutes a day. Beat error is an excellent 0.1 millisecond, but every time I try to reduce the rate, the beat error goes up. And let me show you how the watch is running in a few other positions. 71 seconds gaining per day. Beat error is still the respectable 0.1 millisecond. The amplitude is 252 degrees. Crown down, amplitude is down to 236. Beat error is still pretty low at 0.2. So we are hovering just a little bit above gaining a minute a day. I'm going to quit right here for right now. I'm going to actually put it back in the case, get it on my wrist, and try wearing it. With the movement ticking away, let's switch back over to the dial side and do our final assembly. Let's put this setting wheel back in place, but before I do, I think I'm going to put just a very small amount of grease right on the little post that it rotates on. And let's just put a few dots of grease on this surface. We need to slide the end of this wheel underneath that little cover that is holding the keyless works in place. So with the crown out in the setting position, that wheel is now engaging. Do you remember this guy? This is that double stacked cannon pinion, and I reached out to a few Facebook user groups, and the consensus was that these are supposed to be stuck together. So we are going to give that a try and just hope that it doesn't bind. So before putting him on, I'm just going to put a very little bit of the heavy grease on the outside of this center tube. Let's thread him on. I'm still of the belief that these two pinions, which are nested, should be turning independently, and they're attached together. Here's what's going on. Close-up look. This cannon pinion is engaging with this setting wheel, and then the pinion that's stacked underneath it is meshing with the barrel. When you go to set it, you can see it wants to move. The power is going through that setting wheel. Problem is, when you apply more pressure, do you see how it's trying to move the mainspring barrel? And that shouldn't be. We need to separate this cannon pinion. I just went through my staking set looking for a pusher that I can sneak down in there that's smaller than the big pinion but bigger than the small pinion. I don't have any stakes that I think are right for the job, but I do have this jewel pusher, and if you look at it under the scope, it looks like it's the right diameter to fit inside the outer cannon pinion and maybe push out that inner pinion. And for the bottom, I want a stump that I can rest this on that will engage the outer pinion. So we're going to try using the jewel tool to push out that inner pinion. See if we can do this. Once that's locked in place, now I can take a look at it under the microscope because I can tilt it. Just going to apply a little bit of pressure. Very lightly. How'd we do? We did well. I'm going to clean them. I will lubricate them, restack them, see if they turn one inside the other, and then we can try reinstalling them. It definitely looks like they're supposed to be separate, and that's probably what was binding up, and maybe another reason why the watch wouldn't work. Okay, that was kind of fun. Okay, I'm going to hold him on a smoothing brooch, and then just with a little piece of pegwood, just going to give him a little rub down. So here's a look at both of those pieces under the scope. Just want to be very minimalist with the grease and see if we can't pop them together. But despite the cleaning and lubrication, when they snapped together, the inner pinion was still tightly locked in the outer one. So I pried them apart in much less glorious fashion. The outer pinion was then enlarged by turning it on a smoothing brooch. I reapplied the grease and restacked the parts. Success! The inner one now turned independently. I ended up repeating enlarging the outer pinion several times until I felt the two had just the right amount of grip and they could more easily turn independently. The double cannon pinion was then reinstalled in the movement, carefully aligning the lower teeth with the mainspring barrel and the upper pinion with the minute wheel. While the dial's off, let's wind up that mainspring, and you can see what it looks like getting coiled in the barrel. You can see the arbor turning there, and you can see the spring coils one by one being tightened toward the center of the barrel. And there we go. Okay, let's put that cannon pinion pair back on. Now it's time to place the hour wheel. We're going to go with our blue grease, just a touch right there, and 2 touches there. Drop him into place, massage him in. This movement has lots of exposed time open on my bench for testing, for demonstration purposes. So we're just going to give everything a clean up, a gentle blow off. There's only 3 parts left in our small parts tray. It's the dial washer and these little dial mounting posts. So dial washer first. Final clean off. Oh, and I just blew off the dial washer. Did you see that? Just put him back on. We'll align the dial with the stem at the 3 o'clock position. Now we need to get those little dial feet things back in place. Check everything for clearance, and that looks good. Checking for clearance. Okay, same drill, making sure that the hands are aligned and that there's clearance with the little tube facing downward. As long as he clears the minute hand, we're good. And of course, as long as he doesn't hit the inside of the crystal. Turn him around for the camera. It's time to see if we can get the crystal back into the case. Will it require adhesive, or can we just hand press it in? Let's see. Well, it made a sound, but I think the answer is no, because I don't want to crack the edges. So I'm going to put it into the watch press. I'm just going to take a precaution before trying to insert this crystal because it doesn't always go as planned. So I'm going to do some quick measurements while the crystal is intact. Let's measure the height and the width. Should we do a diagonal? Why not? Can't have too much data, just in case. The crystal is compressed between the upper and lower die. I'm going to tighten down on it just a little bit more, which will evenly make the crystal more convex, and then I should be able to lift the case up. And then if I release it, will that do it? Let's see. Okay, so the crystal is back in the case. Oh, the only problem I can see is that there's a hair. Who invited that hair to the party? Got him. There we go. All right, folks, we're in the home stretch. Final wipe down. Okay. Oh, well, that's not good. The second hand has stopped. All right, we're going to need to reopen it and see if there's something about how it's sitting in the case. You know, it could be as simple as the second hand is too high and it's hitting the crystal. That's very likely. Excellent. Okay, it's running. Is it time to celebrate yet with beauty shots? My ugly duckling. Total non-runner, $3 flea market watch. I want to wear it. I have 3 different looks I could go with on this watch. I've decided to do a leather strap instead of the gold-colored flexi band or a silver-colored flexi band. Here's option 1, traditional black leather. Option 2, this is more of a field watch look. This is a gray suede strap with cream-colored stitch highlights. I found this one interesting because the cream, I think, works well with the dial. So that's choice 2. Choice 3, a little bit of whimsy. This is a blue suede leather with a gold buckle. I like the vivid color of this strap, but they're all pretty cool, so let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you all so much for joining me on this watchmaking journey. I'm Mike, the channel is Watch with Mike. Be good, be well, be safe, and I look forward to our next time together.